Today on Gardening with Creekside, we are going to give you a greenhouse update, and hopefully we are going to get some plastic on this greenhouse. Stay tuned. Hello friends, welcome to Gardening with Creekside. Yes, we have doors on the greenhouse. Yay! So we have talked about this before in those past greenhouse updates. The last week, Jerry and I spent some time up here by ourselves just working. It was very nice, and we got a lot of work done because we got the sliding doors on both the front and the back. So the deal with the doors is obviously they are double doors. This is an 8-foot wide door. They have just run on your classic barn door sliding rails up at the top. And of course they just slide nicely. Over here, come see over this spot. Some really neat things that Atlas always remembers when they're giving us these kits is that with the sliding door, you have these pipes right here. So the pipes will act when, let's say, the door's closed, right? The greenhouse is not in use, but we get wind. Well, it's only attached at the top, so this pipe acts like a buffer, so when the wind blows, the doors don't swing out at the bottom. Genius. And of course, you put them right there at the edge so they're out of the way, so when you pull through you're not going to hit them. Also, what they recommend for us to do is down here you will notice we installed a little bit of a track. This is just a running track, so when the door closes or opens it has something to hit against and run against, so you're not having to worry about it going too far in, and it just makes it a little bit easier and smoother. So that's on. You can see we have the track up here. It's just a nice long, this is probably a 16-foot long track that this door runs on. It's attached to all the 2x4s and the 4x4s. One of you folks asked a great question about how we attach the wood framing to the metal greenhouse, and that was just a genius, I thought, a great question, something I didn't even think to answer one time. But right here you can see that Atlas gives us these great clamps, so you just screw it on to your wood and then that attaches to the clamp. You slide the clamp onto the bow or whatever you need to attach it, and then just bolt it down. So it's nice and attached and in there and doing great. Now, I'm gonna come back over on this side. Christine's my camera lady today. So we've got the doors are up. They're all great. I don't know if Christine, can you see that one back there in the back? Now you might go, well, Jenny, that's a clear door. I mean, that's a solid door and this is a clear door. What's the difference? Well, they're the exact same. Again, Atlas thinks of everything, so both the front and the back are covered with a clear plastic film, so that way the doors don't get messed up or get dirty. And back there we still have some red mud exposed, so once we hung up the doors, I want the doors to stay as clean as possible, so I left on the film. Once the gravel gets down and it's cleaner, then I'll take it down and we'll have the clear doors again. It's all framed out. Jerry and I, when we were installing the doors, we went ahead and added just some extra support to hold everything together. Also, we are going to put this morning on the front, you get one layer of that polyplastic. We're using, again, a 6mm polyplastic. This is it will be a single layer, not a double layer. The double layer is for the roof and then some corners I'm going to show you in a minute. But you've got to have something for that poly to attach to. So Andrew the other day came up with us and attached, this is all the wiggle wire track. We've talked about wiggle wire before, how it's fantastic. So the track has been laid. on these big pieces, then down at the bottom, and then actually on the bows, on the top of the bow that goes all the way around. So once we get that poly up, then Jerry will come back with that wiggle wire and wiggle it in here. So there's a pile of wiggle wire right here. I'm going to try to get one so you can see. Oh, it came out really nicely. So this is the wiggle wire. Jackson, come here. So Jackson's hiding off camera, so he might as well just come so that way he can be seen. So this is the wiggle wire, as you can see, and then Jerry will just take it once the poly's on and weave it into this track, and nothing will take this off. No matter wind, it cinches it down really tight. So we love the wiggle wire. You will see it in action in just a little bit. Jackson, wiggle wire. Now, one thing that is different on this greenhouse as opposed to this greenhouse. Remember, this is still the exact same size, but everything on here is manual. And right now it is an unheated greenhouse. We do not have a heater in it. We're really contemplating adding one really for our benefit. So when we're potting up, it's a little bit more comfortable and takes the nip out of the air. But so it's more like a cold frame in the fact of it does heat up, but it's just by the sun's heat, and it does hold more heat in the nighttime than, you know, obviously outside ambient temperature. One of the downsides is right here on the curtain, you can see it's wide open. And so in the winter, cold air can go in here. So this is not an airtight structure at all. New greenhouse obviously is going to have that heater. We do need it to stay nice and toasty at night because we have all these great annuals that are going to go in here and they need lots of warmth. So what they're going to do is, Jackson, if you'll just slide, thank you. On this panel right here, you will see that there's, of course, is wiggle wire on the side, which would normally be there, but there's also wiggle wire on this bow that comes down right here. This section is going to have the curtain that comes down, just like this, but all four corners are going to have a double layer of that poly plastic. So it's going to be mimicked just like the roof. The roof has a double layer of poly plastic. The corners will have a double layer of poly plastic. The roof on a greenhouse is inflated. We'll have a little motor that will attach, and all it does is it pumps air into the roof. Then we'll have a hose that goes from the roof down to each of the corners. So the corners will be inflated. Well, why is it inflated? Is that heated? No, not necessarily. So these corners in the roof is not heated. All that the little pump does is it inflates air between the two layers of plastic so they expand and it acts as insulation. It's the exact same theory as why you have insulation in your attic. It provides just that buffer from, in the winter, the really cold air versus the warm air in the greenhouse, and then in the summertime, the hot air and the cooler air, hopefully, in the greenhouse. So that the reason that we inflate it is to act as insulation. It just keeps the greenhouse much more efficient. So the corners will have that double layer of poly, and then the curtain will go on top of it. So as opposed to where there's a hole here, there won't be a hole because we'll have a nice poofy layer of poly, and then the curtain comes on top of it, and then we're good. So all four corners will have that. It's going to be interesting today putting on this poly because even though it is a gorgeous day and the sun is out, there's also a little bit of a slight breeze. Normally you would think, well, that's okay, but when you're talking about putting on massive sheets of plastic, just think it's this giant kite, and the least little bit of wind will whoof, send it flying. So it is going to be fun, it's going to be interesting, but we're going to show you the whole process. So let's get started. right, friends, so we have had quite a very productive morning. We got both of the end walls put on for the greenhouse. The poly is on. You will remember it's just a single layer. We went to lunch. We're going to come back and do the roof, which is a double layer. And wouldn't you know it, it was a little windy when we were doing that last end wall. Well, the wind has picked up and it feels like you're kind of at the beach on an afternoon. So right now it's kind of gone down a little bit, but right before we started filming, like the plastic on the top of the greenhouse was really just whipping. And remember, when we're doing this poly for the roof, it is one massive piece of plastic. So this greenhouse is 70 feet long, so it's a 70-foot long, and I don't even know how wide it is because they make it a lot wider for you to have some wiggle room. So it's going to be a massive piece of plastic. We cannot do that on a windy day. Even if there was a little tiny gust, it gets it and just whips it up. So we're probably going to have to hold off and come back and do the roof another day. But at least we have made some progress and we have gotten these two end walls on. It feels so good to be moving forward and getting this poly on to the greenhouse. It is a nice and clear. I mean, you can see pretty much straight through it. The second one, when we were doing it, man, that wind was starting to whip, and we had a lot of hands, but it was still quite interesting to get that cinched down. But it was nice and tight. This is nice and tight. We have just a couple of more little sections of the wiggle wire to put on. You'll notice that it's not had its final cut yet. We don't want to do a really close cut of the poly with that wiggle wire, because in case you need to come back and readjust it, you need some room of the poly to hold on to and pull it. So once we know that everything is where it's supposed to be, then we'll come back and clean up and tidy everything up. But for now, that seems like this is as far as we're going to get on the greenhouse today. We're taking some baby steps, but we are getting there. Pretty soon we'll have plants in here growing and being happy in a nice warm environment, and we can't wait for it. Thank you so much for joining us here on this latest greenhouse update. Y'all have a fantastic day, and we'll see you in the next video. Good morning, friends. It is a chilly, cloudless Monday morning, and we are back here at the greenhouse ready to put on the roof poly for the new greenhouse. As you remember, we had to stop on Saturday because the wind picked up. So we are here bright and early on this very chilly Monday morning. This is going to be an interesting concept of how we're going to do this, because we don't have a lot of room on the side to unfold the plastic and pull it over. So instead, we are trying a new method where we're going to unroll it attached to, we're using the two machines that the poly is going to be spread across, clamped to the machines, and then we're going to pull it across. This is going to be an interesting ordeal, so come along for the ride. Okay friends, so both layers of the poly are on. As always, it is quite an adventure. The rope pulling system seemed to have worked really, really well. So now we are just in the process of cinching the whole thing down. The two pieces of poly are absolutely huge, so we've got plenty of room to work with as far as not having to worry about having too much on each side or front to back. So that's all good. So now Jerry is doing the wiggle wire on the bow of the front because the breeze that we are getting is coming from the north, coming down towards the south. So we're getting the wiggle wire across the bow, then we'll go to the back end, do the other bow, and then we can cinch down the sides, and then once everything is cinched down, we'll do the final cutting as far as trimming up the plastic and getting all the excess off. But it is quite an adventure. You have to make sure that when you're putting the poly, once the poly is on, that you pull it as tight as possible, because once we put the air in there and inflate it, you don't want to have a huge gap. You want to have, you know, just an average size. So you've got to make sure you try to pull everything as tight as you possibly can, because of course then in the heat of the summer that poly will expand a little bit and stretch. So right now here in the winter, when it's as tight, we're trying to make it just as snug as possible. This is definitely a job with the more hands, the merrier, because you need people in all sorts of corners and doing all sorts of different jobs. So we're just going to keep getting everything cinched down. Okay guys, the roof plastic is on. Whew, man, what 5 hours it has been. We started a little after 7, between 7 and 7:30 this morning. It is now a bit around 12 at lunchtime. Both layers are on. It has been trimmed. Yeah, it's been it's been an adventure as always. I'm going to try to recap what we did, so please forgive me if I'm either being repetitive or if I've left something out. Just throw it in the comments and I'll answer. Brain's a little foggy right now. Okay, so we got the 2 layers of the poly on. The first layer, of course, we got on. We used that new method using the rope where Jerry was on the back end of the greenhouse, kind of feeding the poly off the roll. Andrew and I and the kids were on the other end with that rope, pulling it along the whole roof purlin. Once we got there, we unfolded it, and that one wasn't so bad, but as you could see from the video, the piece of plastic was a lot bigger than what we really needed. Again, you know, it's better to have it too big than too small, and at that point you just kind of get it down. And then Jerry went along, because this is when the wind starts to pick up, was not in the forecast, and put some of the wiggle wire in about 3 or 4 different places down each side just to cinch it down. Then we went and did the second row level covering of poly again. That one slid a little bit easier, but then it started to slide off the side, so then we had to recorrect and bring it. Got it up there again, unfolding and then trying to make sure it's somewhat even on the sides. It got on there, and then Jerry used the snap-on clips track down the length of the greenhouse on the outside instead of using the wiggle wire. It was supposed to just snap in, and it said just to tap in. Well, again, not so much so. Got a hammer and mallet and just beat it in, but once kind of figured it out, it did work and got it nice and cinched down. At that point, we could then come through and cut off all of the excess of the plastic. Now you can tell around, it is a very rough cut. We just got enough so that with the wind, it's not flapping. If it rains, it's not going to get puddled up and make a huge mess. At this point, we do not want to come through and cut the poly at the exact line, because if we do for some reason have to come back and adjust it, we need to be able to have some room. And we have learned it is much better to leave it bigger in the beginning, and then once it's exactly how you want it, then you can come back and do your final cuts and do that final cleanup trim. So that is all on. You will notice that on the corners there are those panels of plastic. Remember, we've talked about this before. Because of this greenhouse being a heated greenhouse, the four corners are going to be that double wall insulation. And the way that they are inflated is that you can see over my corner there is a little inflation pump that Jerry attached to one of the bows. Cut a little hole through the plastic, you attach it all in there together, and all it does is it just circulates the air and pumps air into between the two layers of the roof poly. It'll take some time to get it inflated. Once it's inflated, it stays inflated pretty easily. Now, the four panels on the corners will also be inflated. So that is why you see that black tube that goes to both of the corners. So it goes, well, that one's not on yet, but it goes from the roof and then it goes down to that corner panel. Basically, it's just like a little tunnel. That's what I was telling my kids. It's like a tunnel so that the air can travel from the roof into the corners and that they will be inflated. This just helps seal in the greenhouse and retain the heat. Why in the world do we go ahead and do a 2-layer of poly on the roof, and why is it inflated? One major is insulated. Keeps it, warmer in the wintertime, cooler in the summertime. The main goal, of course, is in the wintertime. It keeps it warmer, so we don't have to use as much gas fuel to heat the greenhouse. Also, when it rains, or if it should snow for us, it's a nice poofy tight layer, so water and snow shed much easier. If we don't have it inflated, it's near impossible to get it really, really tight. So you'll have little pockets where the snow and the water could sit in. So you want to make sure it's inflated so it's nice and tight, and then it sheds off. It helps that you can see now with the gentle wind that we're having, how it's just kind of going up and down and it's blowing in that breeze. When it's inflated, it does not move. And so it keeps your greenhouse more protected when you get those big gust of winds, even some really hefty winds. If it's inflated, it can handle it and it's not a problem. What we're going to do now is we're going to finish up on the end corner pieces, get the inflation kit wired, because it's not wired yet, get that going and get it inflated so that way if we need to make any adjustments on the poly, we can do that. The next big thing will be the side curtains to put up, and that will be an interesting option process, because this will be the first time we've done it that has a motor, because these are going to be the automatic roll-up sides. Hopefully you have found this informative and at least a little bit entertaining to see all of the antics that go on here at Gardening with Creekside. We are making progress. We have annuals from Proven Winners that are arriving this week, so time is of the essence. We have got to get this greenhouse going as soon as we can. We're doing really well, but of course we feel the pressure, and I've got to get this with irrigation and the final grade of gravel. There's still lots of things to be done before we can actually put plants in here. As always, thank you so much for gardening with Creekside. We'll see you in the next video. Bye, friends.